Right, so there you can see the closer you are towards needing an income, the more money is going to be allocated into conservative categories. The further away you are to requiring an income, the more money can be going into a long-term growth category. So let's change this back to 65. So I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there. What I wanted to discuss was this long-term growth asset. So long-term growth asset is that portion of the capital which is only going to be spent after 10 years. Now, you can either leave that on inflation plus 7, right, which implies that you're going to be selecting from funds which is in the ASISA high equity space, so your typical balanced funds. So in here, you're going to find Allen Gray Balance, you're going to find Coronation Balanced Plus, 91 Managed, and so on. So it's your Regulation 28 funds. When you're dealing with a product where Regulation 28 isn't of concern, as is the case here with a flexible investment saving product, you can change that long-term growth asset to equity. Now that's just the name of the category. It doesn't mean that there's only equity funds in there. There are simply a range of funds which don't comply with Regulation 28. So here's our flexible growth model portfolio, our global flexible growth model. There's a range of equity funds. There will be property funds in here. So everything that, generally speaking, won't be Regulation 28 compliant, you will find in the long-term growth category when the long-term growth asset is on equity. So there an advisor has a choice. Some advisors say, no, I like keeping the long-term growth asset on inflation plus 7 because my client is relatively conservative in nature. They don't want a large portion of their money going into equity funds. Or a particular client might say, right, I want to put the majority of my capital offshore, in which case you're going to use the long-term growth category on equity and then select some global funds, property funds, whatever the case may be. For this example, I'm going to keep the long-term growth asset on inflation plus 7. Okay, so here's your selection of funds. You've got your cash category, inflation plus 3, inflation plus 5, and so on. So under select assets, you can go and blend, and you'll see that there's a whole range of funds from which to select from, appropriate funds per category. So in this first example, for my cash category, I want 50% in the MiPlan Enhanced Income Fund and 50% in the Allen Gray Money Market Fund. So we can go 50% in there and 50% in there. Much easier than doing this every single time for each client. You can create a fund template. So you might like particular funds and model portfolios in each of the different categories. So let's just go back here for a second. So in the inflation plus 3 category, I've got the inflation plus 2 to 3 model portfolio at 70%, and then the Coronation Balanced Defensive at 30%. In the inflation plus 5% category, I like the low cost balanced model, inflation plus 7. I've got the inflation plus 6 to 7 model portfolio, 91 opportunity. So you could go and do that every single time, or you can save fund selections as a template. So I can go and save template, and then for future plans, I can go and apply a template. So there I've got Travis Williams, and it will then automatically go and apply the selection which I've previously created and saved. Then you can come here, right click, generate your illustration document, English or Afrikaans. Tick on that box. And yeah, you've got your okay, so this is called an illustration report, not an investment report, because you might still want to be showing your client a number of different scenarios. What happens if we retire at 67 rather than 65? What if you increase your contributions from 5,000 to 7,000? Whatever the case may be, you might want to be creating a number of different illustrations. And while I think about that, let's go and create a copy. Over here, we might choose to change the transition age to 67. And here you can right click and you can rename this, and you can say retire at 67, or whatever the case may be. So you can create a number of different scenarios without having to create new plans every single time. You can then create reports for your client, rename them to illustrate different scenarios. That's why it's still called an illustration report. Once you're happy with everything, you then can convert this into an investment and actually then apply it. I've got the MiPlan logo at the top here. You can come here to registers and templates, report image, and add your own logo. Okay, so let's have a quick look through this. Okay, so this document is your proposal document. It's what you're going to be discussing with your client, and at the same time, it's going to be your record of advice in the sense that it's going to disclose everything that you as the planner need to be discussing with your client when providing advice on particular products. So in this case, we are dealing with a flexible investment savings plan. So it's going to give an introduction about what that is, risks that need to be managed and understood. So it's going to combine everything that you really need when discussing this with your client. There you can see the illustration of how the capital is divided into the different categories based on the investment term and then the return objective. There's your initial capital, 2,250,000. There aren't any initial fees. There aren't any contributions. There's my annual fees. Let's just scroll down to this graph. So there you can see the graph. Client currently has 2,250,000. There you can see how it's going to continue growing up until the age of 65, after which it's going to start decreasing. These blue bars at the bottom here, that's the annual income. The different shades in the graph itself represent the different funds and or model portfolios that you have selected. One thing I didn't discuss was the nominal illustration. So if I scroll down a bit further here, you can put in your inflation assumption. Let's say 6%, or you can click on this blue arrow and it'll pull through whatever the latest inflation figure is. So this is a real illustration, implying you're looking at it in today's terms. And after you've put in an inflation assumption, you can look at it in nominal terms, look at it in future terms, including the impact of inflation. So there you now can clearly see how that capital is going to be growing and how the income will also be growing. Here is your cash flow table. So there's your capital. Income starts at the age of 66. There you can see how the capital gradually, again, we're looking at this in real terms. In nominal terms, this capital is probably still growing. In real terms, it's gradually decreasing. And then we can see that it is depleted at the age of 90. So we're happy with that. There you can see the allocation, how that's been allocated to the different model portfolios, different funds, and so on. There's your asset allocation. In each of the underlying categories, what you've chosen, so in the cash category, We selected 50% in the MiPlan Enhanced Income Fund, 50% in the Alan Gray Money Market Fund. We also selected a portion in the Inflation Plus 3 category. The model there, that's illustrating what the underlying funds are. So 91 cautious managed, some inflation plus. For the Inflation Plus 5 category, we selected the low-cost model portfolio. For the Inflation Plus 7 category, we selected a portion in the Inflation Plus 6 to 7 model portfolio and a portion in the 91 managed fund. All right, I think I'm going to leave this tutorial as is at this point in time. In a future one, we'll then load the retirement annuity. I'll illustrate how you can combine that into one product, so you can illustrate to the client what his entire investment portfolio looks like. That's going to give an indication as well in terms of what income is taxable, what income is not taxable, and so on.